and welcome to another episode of the Digital and Social Media Sports Podcast. I am your host, Neil Horowitz. You can find me on Twitter at NJH287. Hit me up on LinkedIn as well, where I post more content. Visit the website dsmsports.net for more episodes and content. And of course, subscribe to the podcast on any of your favorite podcast platforms. We got a best of show for you guys today. I try to do these, a few times a year to help people catch up on episodes that they may have missed. We've had a lot of great guests over nearly 8 years, and this helps you get just a little snippet of some of the greatest episodes. And we have episodes 130 through 136 today that we're going to look back on. Again, about 10 to 15 minutes from each episode. You can skip ahead if you like. But a lot of good stuff, a lot of good knowledge, a lot of good insight, some great guests. So stick around for this entire episode because you're going to hear a lot of awesomeness. And you can always go back and listen to the full episode as well. So to kick off the best of the Digital and Social Media Sports Podcast today, we're going to be hearing from Sal Sino. He is leading an investment holding company now, has a great background in asset management around sports, spent time with WWE. And we talk in this snippet about the value of highlights, which is even more important these days than when we spoke originally. As live viewership goes down, more and more value and eyeballs are going to highlights. We also talk about the value of creators using highlights for organic promotion of a sport, of a league, of a team, how to slice and dice content licensing to maximize revenue, and ultimately where highlights fit into the bigger picture of content and licensing. So a really good part of my conversation with Sal Sino. Stick around.
I think one of the interesting things was that if you look at piracy or illegal behavior that happens, in many ways, that's the truest form of organic behavior, right? So whether it's people ripping clips and posting them up on YouTube to, all sorts of other different piracy, that means if that's happening at a substantial scale, it almost signals to you, hey, there's some serious demand here, and these are folks who are, willing to break the law, although they may not necessarily, see it in that way. And from that standpoint, if you can harness it, I think you've seen companies look at things. So when people first started posting clips on YouTube, you saw the movie studios, the sports leagues, their first reaction was, hey, how do we do cease and desist and take down notices and remove all these clips? And then after a while, they'd start taking a step back and say, wait a minute, one, there's not a really effective way to stop all this because no matter how much we try, everyone always says it's a game of whack-a-mole and you're never going to truly catch up. But even if you could, the next notion is, well, why do we want to take it down? These are our most engaged, passionate fans who really are helping the engagement and the content or what they're doing with our footage is truly organic. How do we harness this and sort of encourage it, but maybe within some barriers? And I think that's what you don't see takedown notices anymore. You've had that's given way to new businesses like Content ID and things of that nature to handle the economic side of things. But the underlying notion of, hey, this is not a bad thing for us. If anything, you see a lot more companies and leagues working with sort of these influencer networks where they say, hey, what if I feed you some of our content and let's work with 50 real influencers and maybe give them first crack at our footage or first crack at the behind the scenes thing and really do something organic that will not seem like it was a campaign put together by the league. And I think you see so much of that happening. And another way to answer your question is the rights have gotten, to your point, whether it was in the movie world or in the sports world, were fairly simple. In the sports world, you would do an exclusive deal for your content with the broadcast network or whoever it may be. And ultimately, the broadcast network would even basically control that copyright of that game broadcast forever. And when you go now, you see windowing, you see, if you look at sort of, the EPL out of London, the way their rights are cut up and how many people have different game packages and short form rights and highlight rights and re-air rights and social, you see that the pie is split. There's so many different slivers of it. And so much of that is to the more you can refine it and put the content in the best position with who's able to exploit it and do the best things for you. And at the same time, there's going to be the traditional broadcasters or pay TV channels are going to be where you're going to get the lion's share of the revenue, but you don't want to ignore social or virtual reality, other things that maybe are more experimental, or social's beyond experiment, but some things that maybe are not huge revenue generators, but are really important for fan engagement and harnessing future fans. Yeah. And so you want to have, it's much more of a portfolio approach as opposed to even 10 years ago, 5 years ago. And also you see people much more, certainly leagues and conferences, much more astute about the copyrights. And before, the broadcasters used to have, like ESPN, if they broadcasted a Big Ten football game, ESPN would retain the copyright to that game. That changed on many fronts 6-7 years ago, and the Big Ten conference or whoever the league or the conference is getting, after the broadcast ends, is retaining the underlying copyright so they can exploit it down the road in the future. So you're seeing so many twists in different ways, and in terms of leveraging that content.
Yeah, I think that a big thing that sticks out to me here is looking at the dichotomy that has really become a talking point in the sports media space, and that is especially sports media and social juxtaposed, and that's NBA versus, say, MLB. And everyone talks up how Major League Baseball was so protective of their rights, and any highlight put on YouTube was taken down as soon as possible. And then you have the NBA where Adam Silver is, let's get all the highlights out there we can, and even like a House of Highlights, who Turner eventually acquired, let them post their UGC. It's all good. It's all going to ultimately drive more value, create more fans at the end of the day. And so I think the question that I'm getting to is, whereas Adam Silver sees highlights as a means to an end, we're not necessarily looking to monetize all his YouTube highlights. I mean, maybe a little bit with highlights here and there, amplify on Twitter to get some pre-roll revenue. But more as, we're creating fans, we're creating opportunities to drive more fans to the linear, and heck, even now fourth quarter purchases are a thing. Whereas MLB is, all about let's just protect it all as much as we can. And EPL is monetizing those highlights or those clips. It sounds like in those other different platforms. So I guess, especially with your time WWE, did you guys see, or do you see digital and social and the kind of non-linear platforms is it still seen more so as a way to promote the bigger piece of pie, the linear, which is paying most of the bills right now, or is it still is it seen as an autonomous place in and of itself where we can monetize social and digital on its own, and it's an asset that deserves our attention?
Yeah, I think that it's a combination. I think depends on the platform. Mm-hmm. Something like YouTube has the monetization is becoming more significant. It certainly doesn't rival what you would be able to bring in on a broadcast deal, but it's no longer an insignificant rounding error. It's a meaningful number. That said, you have to put a ton of content on YouTube to achieve that number. So I think the way a lot of folks are looking at it is, yes, there is some money there, and maybe that could offset the cost you're putting in and make a little bit of money back in return. But more about future fan engagement, and again, that always comes back to you can't miss these fans, and it's not something that, from my experience, that has cannibalized sort of the broadcast viewing. It's more something that has been complementary, and it's almost been a tune-in driver. So in many ways, you have to be there and have a presence and really be helping drive the conversation around your sport or your team. And in terms of other platforms, I would say are far less about monetization. The number, again, whether it's Snap or again, other sort of platforms on the rise, those numbers are less meaningful. And for that, it's more about being there and experimenting and really engaging with the fans.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's really, you don't know where lots of leagues are placing their bets in different places and feeling like, again, whether it's virtual reality, there's not a ton of monetization there at the moment. But it could be, if it is something you want to be on the ground floor and you want to properly test it and make sense if it fits for your sport or for your team, and create all kinds of new cool content that may pull in fans or keep them or get them to watch longer.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, some people are out for that immediate ROI and just trying to see what's going to ultimately deliver a paycheck right away. Whereas it's not always that linear, to use a term that could be construed in a lot of ways. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh no, I was going to say. So when you're looking at that, the question really becomes: does it cannibalize other opportunities? And that's why I think you see a basket when folks are doing things on social. The content that they're using there are often sort of the non-exclusive rights, right? So that doing it on one more platform or two more platforms isn't really going to jeopardize another deal, so to speak, from a monetary standpoint. Whereas your broadcast deals, they certainly want those, whether it's a live game or something like that. Then when you start playing around with that and having a simultaneous broadcast or something going on with live rights on Amazon or Facebook, that becomes a different equation, because that actually would sort of decrease the rights that you would get from a broadcaster if it's available somewhere else.
And that's just a fascinating discussion with Salcino. Could talk to him, pick his brain all day. We had a great conversation offline as well. Definitely recommend you check out that full episode to really come away with an informed POV on this rapidly evolving space of content, of highlights, of slicing and dicing content, every which way, different rights holders. Just fascinating space. It's only getting more complex with each passing day. But next up on the Best of Digital and Social Media Sports podcast, one of my buddies, someone who I've looked up to in the space for a long time. You're going to hear a bit of my conversation with Dan LaTorraca. He is now Senior Director of Marketing for the Carolina Hurricanes. He has spent time with the Brooklyn Nets. He came up with the Carolina Panthers and did some great stuff with them. And, of course, the Carolina Hurricanes are among just simply the top of the heap when it comes to the pro team sports in general. They're having a great year on the ice. They've always been great off the ice. It's a great team there along with Dan. And in this part of my conversation with him, we talk about crafting a brand and a voice, which he did a great job with the Panthers, does a great job now with the Canes, and ultimately also what goes into building a social media strategy. Just some really awesome, in-depth stuff. So you're going to learn a lot, even in this part of my conversation with Dan LaTorraca, the Senior Director of Marketing for the Carolina Hurricanes.
The NFL is so big, and the Panthers have they had a good fan base when it comes to ticket purchases and attendance. Plus, Charlotte was a big transplant city, so generating revenue through tickets was never a big piece of the puzzle for us. It was never a concern because we sold out our games, and if we weren't going to sell out our games, the Pittsburgh fans might help us. So, that was never a focus. Where we made our money was through sponsorship activation and occasionally through merchandise revenue, but that was a smaller piece of the pie. It was all about sponsorship integration. We had some great people like Mahoney on the partnership team that were able to help us take a really big step forward with aligning sponsors with content the right way and finding those custom solutions that were viable for not only the partner and not only Panthers, but also the fan as well. You got to bring value to every piece of the pie there. So that was great to work it out that way. It all kind of came together in 2014 to 2015, and it was it takes time to build a really good social strategy. It takes buy-in. It takes patience. I know it moves really fast, and we all say that, but it does take a lot of time and a lot of continuity to build it the right way, and everything sort of aligned the right way in 2015. And then you mentioned, how did we approach hiring after the 2015 season? By then I was like touching everything. It was web, and it was social, and it was email marketing, and the mobile app, and analytics, and creation, and it was just, my hair was falling out at that point. So I was like, all right, well, we got to add some more staff. And I was lucky enough to hire Amy Keene, who I wanted to hire her for a long time. She was the person that I had like, this is the social and the creative and the content person that I absolutely want in our team. She's so great. She was everything I wasn't too. She was enormously creative. And the best part about her is that, while she is super creative, I think her personality and her character even is better than that. Like she makes everybody around her better professionally and personally, and I definitely mean that. So we hired her in, I want to say, February or March after the 2015 season, and then that's when our social way took off in an even bigger way. And you've seen kind of the stuff they're doing down with the Panthers now, and she's the creative force behind that, and in my opinion, one of the best in the world at this stuff. So that made my life a lot easier. It definitely opened up some new avenues for us, stuff that I didn't have that perspective for, that she definitely did. And that would be the one tip I would offer when you do hire people or add people to your team. Find people not like you. Find people that can add a different perspective and can diversify the way you approach things and the way you think about things. Because if you have a bunch of people that think the same way, you're just going to do the same thing over and over again. And if we do that, then we're never going to grow and succeed and innovate and change. And Amy was great for making things even better. So that's kind of my long rambling answer on that one. I think I might have eaten up a few minutes on that one, buddy. I'm sorry, but phenomenal. That was sort of the long answer there.
I want to ball that up and just replay that. That's something you can listen to it again and again. There's so much insight in what you said. There's so many different angles and directions I can go from that response. And I want to touch on, I think, the voice and the brand of the Panthers. I know you and I even spoke about that briefly offline before this interview started, about how you guys went from, not just from a losing, a tough season, a losing season, to eventually, 15-1 Super Bowl run. How did that voice start to form, and how does that work with senior leadership, with working so it's consistent, not just some rogue social where we're creating some voice or some brand that's not going to be echoed in the stadium, on outdoor, on TV ads, and then even the deeper level of how that looks, from creating visuals that echo a brand or a slogan or a voice, and a marketing campaign, and then video and content, and even the copy you're using on email. So I guess my turn to do a long rambling response of how that played out, and what the direction was like, and how you made sure that there was cohesion across all these emerging and nutritional channels as well.
That's a great question, and I think the key there is understanding that every platform requires you to communicate to your audience in a different way. And Twitter obviously is like the lifeblood of sports and social communication. And that was one where we quickly identified that we wanted our voice on Twitter to be that not only of the organization, but also of the fan. And we kind of found that like gray area in between there where we could have some fun. And, it was the equivalent of Cam dabbing after a touchdown. That's what we kind of wanted our tweets to be when the time was right. You can't overdo it. You don't want the crux of your social strategy to be just like snark, but you want to pick your spots, and you want to, if you pick them the right way, it's going to resonate, in a more powerful way with your audience. And you don't want to overdo it. You got to be just right. You got to know when to read the room. Like Costanza leaping on a high note, you don't want to overdo it. So, that was part of it on the social side was, is getting more fun, getting more conversational, and then making other people comfortable with like, hey, look, this tweet to, that made fun of Dwight from The Office got 20,000 retweets, and this kind of humor goes a long way with our audience. We need to keep doing this kind of thing, and we promise we're not going to do anything that's going to get us in too much trouble. And we got the longer leash, the more success we had, the more we grew, and the more we won, it was easier too. Everything is better when you're winning. It makes life a lot easier. You get a lot more thumbs up and thumbs down.
Was there a conversation at some point with you, and did you guys go to them and say, hey, we're going to start having a little more fun, we're going to be playing around a little more, we're going to emphasize some of the celebrations or the dabs, or was it a combination of them saying, hey, we know we are we're not in a rut, but we want to grow, we want to innovate, we want to be different, we want to stand out. Like, how did that play out for the Panthers, at least? And it's going to work differently for every organization.
That's a great question, and I think the key is in some ways advance warning. Like we had our eye on this for a while. So it was, I told my boss at the time, Henry Thomas, this is what we'd like to get to. I don't know if we'll get there, but if the stars aligned the right way, this is kind of what I want us to be doing. At the time, the LA Kings were starting that a little bit as well. And I said, this is the direction we need to go in. We're not there yet. We got to earn our stripes a little bit more, but this is what I'd like us to be doing, and he got on board. He made other people comfortable with it. And, I was told we had our director of broadcasting, Greg Brand, at the time. He also was very much involved in a leadership way in our department. We made him comfortable with it. And his, words to me were just, it's working. Keep doing what you're doing, be careful, but keep doing what you're doing. And, that's what we did. But, social is only one piece of the puzzle, and from an email side, from a website, it's about giving fans what they want and the content they want, and it's the way they want it. And we had the right people in place to do that. And then Amy found a way to make that even better. And she added some fantastic creative people that are there now that are really just taking everything to a degree I could even dream of. So it shows you just how truly talented she is and how she makes everybody around her better.
Yeah, I mean, at its core, what we do in sports and this area of social and fan engagement, it's about making fans feel good. It's about making fans fall in love with the team, fall in love with the players. And, the methods you do that was going to vary across markets, going to vary across platforms sometimes. But if you're selling the message that's going to resonate, then, I think that's what it comes down to at the end of the day. And it sounds like you guys definitely accomplished that there, and with a little help from Cam on the field as well.
Yeah, well, I'll say, look, if we didn't win games, none of this happens. I think the hardest job in sports is running social for teams that aren't as successful on the field. So you look at someone like Ali Raymond with the Browns there, who's done just a fantastic job there of transforming that brand despite not having a good performance there. Or Jen with the Bears, who that they're obviously very good this year. But those teams that are managing social, managing digital, and kind of on the forefront of the angry fans and dealing with them, and still managing to do a fantastic job with the creative, with the messaging, with driving revenue through sponsorship activation, or still finding the right way to engage those fans. I mean, those are the people that deserve the real credit, because when you're winning, it's easy. It's all about capitalizing. When you're losing, that's when you're really tested.
Yeah, let me ask you. It's a theme I touch on a lot, just because it's close to my heart, of being ready for that moment, being ready when you have that breakout season, and have that Super Bowl run. Like, you guys almost sit down and say, hey, we're about to have something special here. We're on a run. This may not happen again for a while. We got to capitalize. And do you kind of, is it just a matter of this just like another season, but we're just doing a little bit better because we're winning, so we can take a few more chances? Or do you actually say, hey, this is our moment. Like, let's bust out all the plans that we've had in our drawers for the last several years?
Yeah, I think it's a lot of things. I think part of it is, you always want to plan, be championship ready. You always want to have the right infrastructure, the right process, the right people, and the right strategy for if you do win, because you want to be optimistic and you want to be able to capitalize. So that's part of it. Now, when you're kind of in the moment and a team's performing well, I think that's contagious, and it lends itself to being more fun and more loose, and you can get away with a few more things, and that kind of makes you better in that way too. And then, winning creates opportunity. So when, say, you are in the playoffs, you have that chance to create some content that's a little more special, a little more dramatic, and has a bigger impact on the fans, because the affinity is so much higher and the engagement is so much higher. So the goal is always to be championship ready and prepare every season as if you're going to be, in the playoffs. And that's how we're approaching it with the Canes too. It's, we made some investments in some small things that can have a big impact if we, are very good on the ice, and we're seeing that pay off now in this early hot start too, because we have the right pieces in place to sort of capitalize on those big moments.
Yeah, let's talk about the Canes a little bit, and I know you're a little bit into your first season down there now, and it's been a nice little run so far. You've had a few months to prepare. But tell me what is it like to start with a new team? I mean, and learn. It's something I touched on a little bit on this podcast as well, but learning all the traditions, not just learning the sport, but learning about what the history of that team and their cup run, and what they mean to the culture, what their brand is, and if there's a mandate to sort of rebrand and reinvigorate the brand. I mean, what's that first 90 days like for you at a brand new organization like that? And maybe you have some insight as well from your time in Brooklyn.
Yeah, well, absolutely. Being in Brooklyn gave me a good opportunity to manage a really, really large team, and that definitely, a lot of the challenges I faced there and a lot of the experiences I had there lended themselves well to kind of what I'm dealing with the Hurricanes. It's a much smaller team and they're really great people down here in Raleigh. So a lot of it is learning the people in your organization and what their goals are and their motivations are, and understanding the fans too, and kind of what clicks with them, where they are emotionally. And in our case, the Canes haven't made the playoffs in a number of years, so they're hungry for a winner, and that definitely impacts how we build content and how we message and how we market. It's a lot of it is about understanding who's on your team and what they're good at and what they want to achieve. And when you're on the execution level and you're a social manager or you're marketing coordinator, it's about, if you're going to be a good manager, you have to invest in those people, because those are the people on the front line. So my job now is to put everyone around me in position to succeed, and to make sure that they're learning and growing and identifying what they're good at and trying to make that better, and identifying what they're not as good at and trying to make that better too, and sharing and teaching. That's what it's all about. So right now it's about observation. It's about those little low-hanging fruit opportunities of like, well, if we did this way, this can work out better. If we invest in graphics in this form, we can free up our in-house creative team to do other special things.
Yeah.
Identifying those opportunities to the small steps that can lead to big impacts, and then also understanding the people that are around you, because, and this is the one thing I'll say a lot probably in this podcast and in general, it's all about the people. Sports is a relationship business, it's a people business, and that goes for internally and externally. It's all about managing relationships and people, and if you do that the right way, you're going to be successful.
Have you found, and I guess we can look at this a couple of ways. One is just different teams in different markets. Another is different sports, where you have 8 home games, 16 regular season games versus 82, 41 with NBA and NHL. And have you found that A, across markets, Brooklyn to Carolina, and B, across sports, NFL to NHL and even NBA, that are, is it? I don't want to say the same. By no means is it the same, but are there prevailing principles that can stick with you, so that what works in just when fan engagement in general, it tends to be pretty consistent? Or are there nuances that you really have to pick up on, saying, hey, when we only have 16 games, we got to treat content day to day a little bit differently, or the fans in Brooklyn are a little bit different than the fans down in Charlotte or Raleigh?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's a great question. There are a lot of similarities between what I'm experiencing with the Panthers, what I experienced with the Panthers, and what I'm experiencing now with the Canes. Obviously, it's the same region, so the way that the fans behave is similar in a lot of ways, and it reminds me a lot of where the Panthers were in 2011 is kind of where the Canes are now. We're on the precipice of having a very good team. The fan base is a little on the smaller side, but developing and hungry for a winner. And I've seen the potential and I've seen the payoff in this market before. I know it's there. It's a team that's only been here for 20 years, but they're so hungry for a winner. They have tasted that before. I mean, they won a cup in 2006, so they know what it's all about, but it's been a couple of rough years, and I think the potential to be great again is there, and the potential to be fun again is there too, and that matters in a big way. The being up in Brooklyn with the Nets and Islanders, that prepared me for the crazy shift between the football schedule and a basketball schedule. And like on the NFL side, I want to say it's easier, because it is. I mean, you kind of point all your content and all your messaging and all your strategy towards one day a week. It's Sunday, you play your game there, so your entire narrative is focused on that. And then after Sunday, you turn the page and you focus on the next game. And that's obviously a big football cliche. You take one game at a time, but it's true, and it's a very, very manageable narrative. It's so linear. It's all pointed in one direction. With basketball, especially a team like the Nets that have, I'm a fan, so I can say this, they haven't been very good for a number of years. Yeah. You got to learn how and when to turn the page. You got to turn it a lot faster. You got to message things differently. It's a totally different approach, because you're selling optimism and you're selling the future. You're not selling the present. Unlike the Panthers, who were very much in the moment, their window is wide open, whereas the Nets window is probably still a few years away. So it's a totally different pace. It's a totally different narrative. You have to structure and plan your content differently. It's a totally different approach, which then prepares you really well for the hockey side. So definitely I've got a taste of that pace now, and it's not easy. It takes, I think, a number of years to really get a good feel for it. But it's there. We have the right people in place that know the sport and know the fans, and our team with the Hurricanes is really good with that. So I'm in good hands as I kind of get up to speed. Is kind of what I'm getting at.
So I want to hear a little about, and just a few more minutes left, with Dan Lazzaracca, Director of Digital Marketing for the Carolina Hurricanes. I want to hear a little about what goes into planning a season, and for the NHL, for the Hurricanes, what you've been spending the last several months on, whether it's building up templates, building up graphics, making sure that there's roles assigned, everyone knows what they're doing on a game day, on a practice day, at a morning skate, and just everything under the sun. Do you have folders with different celebration gifts or goal gifts for this guy? Obviously we can talk about this all day, but what are kind of the key things that you're marking off as you guys prepare to go into this grind that hopefully continues into June?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things I wanted to do getting in the door was identify ways to make our internal marketing team more efficient. So, what could we do to work smarter and not harder? And some of that is outsourcing certain things, like some of our paid media trafficking and strategy. How can we use that a partnership with different agencies to take some of those things off our plates? People that have the time to manage and optimize and run those lead gen campaigns and those programmatic campaigns, and we're involved with it still, but it's not as big of a time consuming piece for us. So right. Then the other piece of the puzzle there is we partner with an agency, Foxhammer, that does our in-game graphics. And that is an opportunity for us not only to sponsor a lot of those graphics and have them essentially paid for by partners, but also get this really high quality stuff out there while doing it. Yeah. But then freeing up our in-house creative team to not have to worry about a score graphic, which is like obsolete 5 minutes after you post it. So it takes some pressure off them, so they can focus on more fun projects and bigger things as we kind of get along in the season. That isn't going to be just a score graphic or a final stats graphic. And that also means that my social coordinators won't have to mess around in Photoshop in the middle of a game and miss the action, so they can focus on engaging the fans better and putting out better content. So getting more efficient was the key, and finding ways to showcase player personality was the other one. So we partnered with Open Doors in order to empower the players a little bit more, to be more active on social, to help educate them, to put them in position to showcase their personality and assist them with getting content to their accounts. That players will always be more influential than the team itself. It's just how it is. And this is a tool that lets us do that a little bit more. So going back to identifying those small opportunities that can have a big impact is what I wanted to do out of the gate while I evaluate our team and our process and our fan base and everything else that we do, so we can formulate a really good plan and refine what has to be kept and maybe what isn't as important as we move on. So it's a work in progress. As it's hockey's a very unique sport. It's very nuanced, and I'll fully admit that I am no expert in it, and I probably won't be an expert for a number of years in it, but I'm in good hands with the people we have, and I'm trying to do everything I can to put them in position to succeed while they teach me the ropes too.
Just so awesome. Have really enjoyed getting to know Dan over the years, both personally and professionally. He is a gift to this industry. Teaches a lot of young aspiring pros, teaches a lot of senior leaders as well, as he is really among the thought leaders in the space and is super generous with his knowledge and his time. And I highly recommend you listen to that full episode. That's episode 131 with Dan Lazzaracca of the Carolina Hurricanes. But next up on the Best of Digital and Social Media Sports podcast, we go into the world of data-driven insights and to really get a great look at what it means to have big data and to make insightful, actionable decisions using that data and using what you learn from it. As you're going to hear part of my conversation with Jim Hanauer. He is the product manager for Fanbase, which is with Learfield IMG College, the big data solution that they are building, that he is really a big part of the brains behind it. And Jim has spent his career in this space of sports, of data, of marketing, of engagement, of monetization. He spent time at Ole Miss, did his own thing with Hanauer Strategies, working with a lot of big names as well, and now is with Learfield IMG College. In this part of my conversation with Jim, we talk about what it means to really look at big data and to have that strategy, to pull insights and turn those insights, turn what the data says into real actionable strategy, how to balance a bit of the art and the science, working with a lot of people in the room, and when some people see data in different ways than others, and so just a wealth of knowledge in the space. So stick around because you're going to learn a lot in this part of my conversation with Jim Hanauer of Learfield IMG College.
In a lot of organizations, you work on a lot of different platforms, a lot of different softwares. There's not sort of one central location where all that data lives. So what the data warehouse does is it brings in all the different data, from the macro level down to the micro level, to where you can bring in, total sales, but then you can bring it all the way down to a singular person. That exists in, say, your ticketing software. You can bring up a person and there they are and their tickets, but that ticket software is not talking to merchandise or your emails, and so your data warehouse can bring all that in and let you then look at everything holistically. So from a strategy point, going back to the beginning, it actually all started, a big part of why was surveys. Michael Thompson came from the ad agency, big on sort of data collection. He's led the SEC survey, initiatives for I think the past 5 or 6 years on game day surveys, end of year surveys to improve the game day experience. So it all kind of started there. Okay, we're getting all this great survey information. What can we do with it? So we bring it all into the warehouse, and then we have the opportunity to, do heat maps. Okay, we have all these people are, complaining about the sound of the band. Okay, where are they in the stadium? You start to kind of highlight, problem areas with the survey information. Then you can layer on sort of, ticket information. But again, sort of the idea of we can bring in all this data into one place, and then back on sort of that 3 stages of data: discovery, visualization, activation. Okay, discovery, where do we have data? Where can we bring it in the warehouse? What do we need to connect to? Then visualization, how do we visualize the data? Whether it's a dashboard, heat map, all different kinds of applications there. And then the activation can either just be internally, hey, we know the information, we can make a decision, or hey, we can activate on that data to marketing automation, emails, or
very cool.
Reporting, all that kind of stuff. So the data warehouse is then just sort of the central location to make it all work. And luckily, we have a great data warehouse provider with SSB that's been a tremendous partnership for us, and they kind of make it go. But that's sort of the ins and outs of data warehouse at Ole Miss and sort of in our structure.
Nice little schooling there. I appreciate the explanation and good stuff for sure. And I think something that's on top of my mind now is you have a lot of data, you have the ability to query it, to manipulate it, to draw insights from it, and I'm sure there's a little bit of both sides to this coin. But do you tend to then look and see what the insights are that are kind of hidden in that data, and find those things that can help you, or do you tend to start more with the questions first? Here's what we're trying to improve. Here's what we think we want, and here's a question we want to be able to answer with the data. How do you tend to go at it in general, and how did you go about it initially with Ole Miss?
Yeah, I think you have 2 kind of parts, right? You've got just your basic visualizations, your health of the business reporting, right? It's how many tickets have we sold? Where are we at with donations? What are the hot merchandise items? There's all the sort of applications of just, here's what overall data is telling us, or sort of health of the business, right? Mm-hmm. The other side of the data application, kind of more what you're online with, is, can you just take data and see what it tells you, or are you answering the question? 99% of the time, you start with a question, because what data do we need? What's the question? So right now we're looking at, football ticket prices. Okay, what kind of data do we have? What information is important? Looking at single game tickets, season tickets. So you kind of start with, hey, the overall question is, are our football tickets priced correctly? Mm-hmm. Then you start bringing in all these sort of different views of that data. Okay, what's the secondary market telling us? What are our own tickets telling us? And then some of that you'll uncover, other trends or things that will pop out. But you always have to kind of start with that question to kind of give you guidance. I don't think there's sort of a, or at least to my knowledge, there may be for people much more than me, but sort of a, plug in place where, hey, we plug this data in and then everything just spits out what we need to know, right? I mean, there's probably some machine learning or whatever, but for us, our strategy is always, what's sort of the question at hand, and then again going back to sort of those three stages to say, hey, what data do we need, and then things will definitely pop out from there. An example, we were looking at our Fanatics data the other day, so merchandise data, and matching it back to the customer level, which is another thing your data warehouse does. It looks at all your different platforms and says, hey, this Jim Hanauer is the same over here as it is in your ticket. So sort of, singles it down to a singular level. So we were looking at Fanatics data, just saying, hey, who are our merchandise buyers? And we looked at it, and I think it was less than 5% of those people were season ticket buyers.
Wow.
So, right there, it kind of started with a super simple question, but then you drill down, hey, less than 5% of those people are season ticket buyers. From there, well, who are these people? Where are they coming from? What state are they in? Are they donors? Are they interacting on other platforms?
Yeah.
From there, it starts to just stem.
You go down the rabbit hole, kind of.
Oh, yeah. And for me, I'm like, this is so exciting. All the opportunities of this and being able to sort of understand the sort of data history of each individual and trying to map that out is exciting. But, for us, it's definitely, it always starts with some type of question. And then from there, I think the opportunities are endless. And depending on who you're dealing with, the ways you can showcase the information are endless as well, depending on how they want to view it and all that kind of stuff. So it's exciting.
Yeah, well, let's touch on that last point you make, because I think that's something that's so common in this space is, how do we actually, actionable insights? What do we actually do with the data might be telling us something, instead of going, oh, that's interesting, or let me try to explain this to the powers that be that can make decisions based off it. What goes into that communication of those insights, communication of that data, visualizing it, having some sense of design, and being able to go from your quantitative side and take off your analyst hat and put on your communicator hat, or your design hat if you're creating something visual. And how important is that, and really what recommendations would you give to be able to take a database insight and communicate that, whether it's into a recommended action or just be able to get that light bulb to go off with someone that doesn't spend all day in a data warehouse?
Yeah, well, I think again it comes in different ways. So each person is going to come at a situation differently, and I think it stems from a lot of times in meetings you're like, oh, people think hot dogs are overly priced, and someone's like, yeah, like they're so expensive, and then it's like, well, what is the data telling us? So I think the use case for instead of, hey, we're just guessing at things, using the data to back up decisions. So
Yeah.
if it's concessions pricing, okay, well, what data do we have to either support what you're saying or deny it? And what data do we need, and how does that come about? So we can look at surveys, we can look at actual sales, et cetera. So I think, again, it always kind of starts with that question or problem. But for us, it's definitely, time out.
No worries.
I just looked where we're going. So actionable insights, right? So
3, 2, 1, go.
Yeah, so for us, it always starts with the question of sort of what are we talking about? Who has an opinion or whatever. So we're not just making decisions on the fly. Hey, we've always done it this way. Well, what is the data telling us? So we can pull that data in, answer those questions. But, from a data side for me, so if I'm working on some data and, hey, here's what the data is showing, here's how I view that data. What we have, or at least what Ole Miss has, is they have external teams. So the external team is sort of the leadership around that sport, ticket sales, marketing, development, everyone in the room, marketing, everyone's in the room to sort of make decisions on, that team. So for me, I can pull in the information, I see it some way, and, it'll either back up someone's opinion or not. But giving them sort of the data to say, hey, here's sort of what I see, but here's the information. Now, someone else may see it differently, or again, they're infusing, maybe looking at it from a different view that I'm not looking at it. But the real goal of data is to make more efficient and data-driven, strategy. And I just lost it again.
No worries, man. Go back on whenever you're ready.
What was the question?
It was about being able to communicate what the data is telling you in an effective manner to the higher ups.
For me personally?
Sure.
Okay. All right, so let me just start from the beginning. Is that cool?
Yeah, no worries.
I'm sorry. The sun's shining. I'm like staring out in the distance.
You're all good, man. Count yourself down, and then get back into it.
Effective communication to leaders.
What's the data telling us, and how do we actually communicate that to the people that make decisions?
Okay, perfect. All right. Okay, so 3, 2, 1. So data is always telling us something, and we've already talked about a couple things. It starts with a question. It starts with hey, what are we trying to figure out? What data do we have? So a lot of times in decision making, there's two ways to approach it. What does everyone think? Or, what is the data telling us? So, what always hurts an organization is, hey, we've always done it this way. Why are tickets priced that? Well, they have been the past 5 years. Yeah. So figuring out, a way in every organization to say, let's take a step back. What is the data telling us? So, instead of just everyone throwing their opinion out, what is the data telling us? So, at Ole Miss, they have a structure to where there's an external team. Each team is over a sport. That sport, external team would have someone from marketing, someone from tickets, development, concessions. And so that's sort of the people who are making the executive level decisions for that sport. So for me to communicate the data, people are going to look at data a lot of different ways, right? There's, hey, here's an Excel file, jump through these sheets and tell me what you think, or hey, you do it, but people are visual learners. So, and you want to make your data very digestible quickly. So, whether that's a dashboard, et cetera, being able to, hey, here's the data, here's what it's telling us in charts or graphs or whatever, to be able to back up decision making is the real key. And some people, in a lot of ways, some people want that data. Some people don't even look at it. That's one of the things you always struggle with in any organization, especially just working in data, is sort of you have people who believe in it, some people who don't. So you kind of gotta word things right. You gotta have it clear, concise. From my standpoint of view, I don't necessarily ever say, here's what you should do. But, the data should be what's leading the conversation, leading the, strategy and, executive decision making. Hey, what does the data tell us and how do we use it in the right way?
Okay. Just fabulous stuff with Jim. He's a really smart dude. And also just a really awesome guy. I call him a friend. I'm proud to call him a friend and continue to learn a lot from him every time that we speak. So definitely listen to that full episode if you want to get more insight and more knowledge and a better POV into that space and really how to make sense of all this data that's coming at you in the social and digital media space and sports. But next up on the Best of Digital and Social Media Sports podcast, a fantastic discussion. I felt privileged to be able to speak with Greg Wyshynski. He is the senior NHL writer at ESPN, prior to that, spent a lot of years with Yahoo Sports and built their Puck Daddy blog. And of course, ESPN and hockey are definitely in the news these days as ESPN has become the primary rights holder for the NHL. And Greg has been doing the NHL thing at ESPN for a while now and has really helped ESPN create a new and invigorated hockey brand. And we talk about his background as well as what he's doing at ESPN right now with building their hockey strategy, helping to present the NHL and the storylines in a way that appeals to the diehard fans as well as the casual fans. Because there's a lot of fun to be had in hockey, as Greg proved out in his years at Puck Daddy, and is continuing to help craft really compelling, interesting stories at ESPN alongside Emily Kaplan and the rest of the hockey team there. And it's only going to get bigger and better because now that they are the primary rights holders, ESPN and NHL, ESPN and hockey should only get more interesting. So listen to this part of my conversation with Greg Wyshynski of ESPN.
There was a couple things I had to sell them on as far as that format went. One was that we could really push the envelope into weird places. Like, I mean, in the first year that Sean Leahy and I were running Puck Daddy, we ran a Gary Bettman Photoshop contest, which, I don't think the other blogs were necessarily looking to do at that point at Yahoo. Like, I'm just like, follow us into this weird place. And we had hundreds and hundreds of people submitting Gary Bettman as Marilyn Monroe and Gary Bettman as like the Predator and all this other stuff. It was fantastic. I mean, looking back on it, it's a miracle I ever got a credential, but like it was pretty amazing. But the other thing I had to sell them on was frequency. Like, part of the thing that I wanted to do at Puck Daddy was based on my experience at Deadspin, which was, I'm thinking of that guy or that girl at the office who's sitting in their cubicle. They're stuck there the whole day. They're looking for stuff to do. And I wanted there to be something every hour of that day for them to read that was going to be new and different. And so, that was sort of the Deadspin model to constantly be updating and flooding the zone with posts. And we wanted to do the same thing, which was not necessarily the purview of the other blogs. They were kind of writing it on a need-to-cover basis. But I wanted it to be a situation where even if it was a short, pithy thing with a YouTube highlight from the KHL or something, like I wanted to have something there for you that was new every hour, and that was sort of the goal for me and Sean and the other writers.
Very cool. And then I'm thinking obviously, and it's really cool that you were engaging fans that early on with stuff like Gary Bettman, user-generated content. How did social media start to enter the picture? I mean, when you got there initially and started building up, just your own career overall, it was starting to become a thing. I mean, the internet was a thing, obviously, and then Facebook and Twitter came along, and that probably allowed you to build build a brand more so than just a blog, but a brand that's on all channels and having to look at different ways to service social media. So I guess how did you see social media come along? Did you see it right away as, oh crap, we got to be on this channel now 24/7, or this is our opportunity to really get into a level playing field where distribution is at our disposal?
I was an early adopter of Twitter, and I told the story before on podcasts, but like the moment that I realized it was going to be important was the night it was the playoff game between the Penguins and Capitals when Sidney Crosby and Alex Ovechkin both had hat tricks in the same game, and Crosby after the game complained that there was too many hats on the ice in Washington, and it took them too long to clean them off the ice. And so I was in the press conference. I had just started on Twitter, and I tweeted his comment. And at the time, there wasn't like live post-game coverage of his press conference. Yeah. Like it would be something that would have been on a video 20, 25 minutes later on one of the team websites. So I tweet that quote about Crosby complaining that it took them too long to clean up the hats. And I left the press conference and went back to my computer in the writer's room, and this thing went just mega viral. Wow. Like people were like, come on, that's a joke, right? Like he didn't really say that, right? Because no one had seen it anywhere else. It was only in real time on Twitter that they saw that quote. And that was the moment I'm like, oh, Jesus, Charlie, the game's changed now, hasn't it? So, I've had an interesting relationship with Twitter. I think at times I have definitely veered off into myopic, petty arguments way too often. I think that's a product of having my first inklings of sports writing having been, writing on news groups when I was in college and arguing with people all day long in Devils and Flyers and Rangers news groups about hockey. And I kind of feel like that part of me comes out on Twitter way too often. But it's been a way for people to kind of see different parts of my personality. It's not always hockey on my Twitter feed. ESPN nor Yahoo owned it.
Right.
There's a lot about movies and sometimes politics and a lot of stuff about beer and stuff like that. So I think from that aspect, it's let people know a bit more about me. But, for me, the biggest sort of crossing the Rubicon to allowing people to know me better and kind of building a following was probably through the podcast. It's a medium that allows you to really be yourself, to engage in conversations, to let people hear your voice, let people know about your life. And so, I've done, I guess it's now 4 of them. I did the Puck Daddy Radio with Rob Pizzo. I did Merrick versus Wyshynski, which is where most people really got to know me. And now I have 2, ESPN on Ice and Puck Soup. And I think those things, I think, did more than anything to let people kind of in and understand me better beyond anything I writ.
100%. I mean, you almost feel like you know the people because you hear them in your head every day, all the time. I'm glad you touched on that because I did want to ask you about getting started with podcasts, doing Puck Daddy Radio. I mean, the word podcast didn't really exist then, probably, and you were ahead of the curve, ahead of the game, and now it's become a thing. We're still kind of waiting to see it really mature to full monetization. But how did you first approach on-demand audio and wherever you want to call it podcasting? And where do you see it going in terms of becoming a bigger piece of the revenue pie for ESPN and just and how you've been able to drive value from Puck Soup, from Merrick versus Wyshynski over the years? It's a loaded question, but I would love to hear your perspective on it.
Well, it's interesting because three of the 4, for the most part, have had big media partners. Like Puck Daddy Radio was something I did with The Score in Canada. For a while, it was sort of a shared enterprise with them and Yahoo, and it was good. It was a daily show. It was great for what it was. And then Merrick and I, when we got together, it was a partnership between Yahoo and Sportsnet, and that was great. I mean, as far as working with Jeff and building what was at the time a really unique and trailblazing podcast, in my opinion, on hockey. There hadn't been really one that was as engaging, I think, as ours, and the following that we've built. I mean, we still hear from people every day that miss the podcast, and it's touching every time somebody says it. And then, with ESPN on Ice, that was a situation where the minute I got hired, I'm like, we're going to do a podcast. And the podcasts in the past at ESPN have been sort of all over the map. I mean, there were ones that Scott Burnside and Pierre LeBrun did where they were all sort of on the phone together. And, I mean, it was great content, but it was not exactly my cup of tea as far as, audio quality. And then Don LaGreca did one for a bit that sort of skewed more, I think, towards the East Coast than anything else. So when I wanted to do one with them, I wanted it to kind of be more in the vein of Puck Daddy Radio and MBSW, in the sense that we were going to cover the topics of the day and talk to newsmakers and that kind of thing. And I wanted Emily to be a part of it because I felt like for it to be a way for people to kind of understand our coverage and kind of understand what's happening at ESPN, it was super important to have her involved. And plus, she's awesome. And I really didn't want to be sitting there talking to anybody else but her, because the conversation we have about hockey is fabulous. And I think that we've gotten better over time, and the show is great now. And then Puck Soup was interesting because it started off as part of the Nerdist Network. Jonah Carey, big baseball journalist, was starting a sports vertical there that kind of never took off and kind of fell apart. And so we left, and that's the example of you can do this thing without a big media partner. Lozo and I took it independent. We work with Midroll to sell ads. We have a producer that we pay. And then, last year we started a Patreon subscription service, which has been more successful than any of us anticipated insofar as people signing up. It's $5 a month. You get 6 things. You get 4 mailbags, a bonus podcast, and then a listener's choice podcast that the subscribers get to pick each month. And, it's been a crazy, great, and satisfying thing to not only be able to produce extra content for the people that dig the show, but also to have so many of them willing to subscribe to something like that. It's been really cool.
Yeah, I mean, and I really just think it's interesting to know that you were doing this podcasting thing before Serial, before it seemed like it just kind of blew up all of a sudden. I did want to touch. I know we talked a little about this offline as well. Just a few more minutes left. You're the Greg Wyshynski, senior NHL writer at ESPN, making the move from Yahoo to ESPN and really going to a place where you were kind of running your own show almost by that point with between you and Sean Leahy and for Puck Daddy to a big behemoth at a place that was for years. It's kind of almost become a trope that ESPN doesn't cover hockey, or at least they don't cover as much as Buccigross would like them to do. So I guess tell me what it was like going to a bigger behemoth like ESPN, carving out a niche there, and also what they wanted you to do. If they wanted you to bring the Puck Daddy Greg Wyshynski to ESPN, if they wanted you to go in a different direction.
No, I mean I think they wanted what I did at Puck Daddy, which was keeping an eye and a finger on the pulse on what the fans are talking about and the stories that resonate with them. I did a lot more writing for fans than I did writing for my sources at Puck Daddy, and I think that's something that ESPN found appealing. And then on top of that, obviously, is they know that I'm someone who can bang out a story, write a feature, but also write some opinion when necessary. And if nothing else, I mean, I'd like in the next year or two to kind of be able to do a little bit more opinion, whether it's on video or written. I think in the first year, kind of have to just establish your bona fides a little bit at that place, and then maybe you can get a little bit more opinionated as time goes on. But as far as the ESPN doesn't cover hockey thing, I mean, like it really isn't as relevant now as it maybe was a few years ago. Like when I was hired there was a lot of conversation about where the sport was and where the upper management at ESPN saw the sport going. I mean, like, with McDavid and with Matthews and with Laine and with all these incredible young stars that are in the league now, and the fact that you can turn on a game and be somewhat confident you might see them do something versus, maybe 15 years ago when you would turn on the game and hope to see a goal. It's a different sport right now. And it's a sport where the stars are able to shine and the highlights are spectacular, and it's a bit easier to sell these things to a casual sports fan audience than maybe it was, around the lost season. And then on top of that, I mean, the fact that we have ESPN Plus now, and that we have a nightly highlight show with Linda Cohen and Buccigross, and then NHL games on every night as part of our MLB Advanced Media deal, means that our hand's back in the cookie jar. And it's no secret that when ESPN has a piece of a sports league or a sport itself, there's intense and increased coverage of that sport. So the fact that we now have these games on Plus means that, for example, the Red Wings play the Rangers, and I write a story about a Red Wing. Well, that story is going to get some pretty prominent placement on the front page of ESPN because they're going to be promoting the game on Plus that night. So it not only allows it's not only ESPN now putting added value on NHL coverage, but for me and Emily, it's also a chance to get our stuff featured more because it's tied into actual games being shown. So it's a mutually beneficial thing, and there's no question that, like, for me and Emily and Chris Peters and everybody else that's working on the NHL side, we can really feel the wind at our backs now. Like, we can really feel the momentum building at this place towards bigger and better coverage of the league, and I think it started last year, in my first year. I mean, the coverage of the Cup final between Washington and Vegas was intense and huge and hugely successful based on the numbers that I saw.
Definitely. One more quick question before we get to the shareable stat, and then some slap shots with Greg Wyshynski of ESPN. I wanted to sort of touch on saying on ESPN and you in your position there as senior NHL writer, and what the kind of editorial direction is, what the content direction is, how that's determined. Are you guys actively seeking to maybe convert those ESPN casuals into hockey fans, into NHL fans, or is it just as much focusing on the diehards or the avid NHL fans that want to know, who should be centering Patrick Laine, or as opposed to like, Connor McDavid took another awkward picture in the airport. Check it out. By the way, see him score a sick goal. How do you determine what kind of strategy and editorial direction you guys should be taking at your position?
Well, the first thing about that direction is that when we do run the Connor McDavid airport photo, it's the same rule that we had at Puck Daddy, which is that we'll never just run something to run it. Like there has to be some value added to it in some way. And that's what differentiates sites like ours from something like Bar Down with TSN, which is just, post 5 tweets and then hit publish and then not actually give you anything beyond that. I never want to be that. So that's like rule number 1 is like always add value, always advance the story. It's not enough to just write the news that everybody already knows. You have to tell them the how and the why. And it's one of the reasons at Puck Daddy that people used to come to us when news would break because they knew they would get more than just an embed of a Darren Drager tweet and then 3 paragraphs built around it that are just rehashing what you already know. So that's one big key. But as far as the overall direction goes, it's not all that different than what I did at Yahoo. I am pitching my coverage to the widest audience possible. That does not mean that I'm not covering myopic things that hockey fans are going to care about. I mean, we in our power rankings every week, we kind of get nerdy at them sometimes with analytics and with team by team stuff. And so not only are you getting like a ranking of teams, which is comfort food, but you're also getting some really good information inside of the post as well. But it's trying to just get people to the ones that are already converted, the people who have let the light of hockey into their heart to come read us and appreciate the coverage that we're doing. But also, creating entry points for people that may be either casual hockey fans or might not be familiar at all with the sport. Because I think there's as I showed for 10 years at Yahoo, there are ways to pitch the coverage that you can cast a net and catch a lot of people that might otherwise not be reading a hockey story.
Just a fabulous chat with Greg Wyshynski, senior NHL writer for ESPN. Definitely recommend listening to that full episode. Greg is an awesome personality, really smart and thoughtful about the space that he's done so well in, and you get a nice piece of insight into what to expect from ESPN now that they're getting bigger and bigger into hockey, and no one better to help lead the way than Greg Wyshynski, who's been doing it great for a lot of years, and definitely follow him across platforms, read his stuff, listen to his podcast, and check out that Full Pockets episode with me and Greg. Next up on the Best of Digital and Social Media Sports podcast, got a few more to go. You're going to hear part of my conversation with James Julio. He is the founder and CEO of MVP Interactive. MVP Interactive is a really interesting company that really has made their bones on building VR and AR experiences, experiential fan engagement, a lot of it being on-site, digital, physical activations, helping the brands activate and with sponsors and their team deals. And a super interesting conversation. This part of my chat with James, you're going to hear about kind of the future of fan experience. Why are fans going to continue to come out to the venue, especially as we open back up? There's going to be a bigger value prop to push to come to the arena, come to the stadium after being away for so long. Yeah, you might get that initial period where fans just want to come back just to be back, but there's a greater expectation now for what's in it for me to come out there. Why am I going to come out there and getting more than you get out of the home experience, because the home experience is only getting better and better. So we talk in this part, you're going to hear about what it means to monetize these novel experiences, what brands want out of a sponsorship activation, how to make sure that they're getting value and how to present that value to them, and ultimately where this future fan experience is going. So listen up. James is a really smart guy, and you're going to hear part of my conversation with James Julio, founder and CEO of MVP Interactive.
That we have really undertaken and started to evangelize as a early adoption kind of program, in that we want to create this interactive network, or this in-stadium interactive network of connected devices, right? So you can imagine seeing these units throughout any facility, any sport throughout the country that maybe speaks to each other from across the country, and a leaderboard is demonstrated on at Madison Square Garden in this gaming activity that is showing up at the Staples Center, right? And so, and the way that we see that happening, and to kind of get to your question, is that we want to show value and give value to the folks willing to take on new inventory. And so that's your corporate sponsorship team, right? So if you go, we feel that we have technology that can add revenue to your efforts as a property owner. So we go to a facility and say, hey, we're going to get in front of you in the off season and provide this unit to you free of cost, no hardware costs, right? Mm-hmm. So we're going to educate you on the capabilities of all the technology, all of the data, here are the case studies, and here are examples of work. we're going to add this into your sales deck as a new piece of inventory, because our belief is the concourse of these stadiums are very much the arteries to the game day experience, right? And it hasn't been leveraged to the point where there should be sponsorable inventory on those concourses, right? We talk about, what you see on TV being, the bowl, the inner bowls, the jumbotron, maybe some of the on-field branding, some of the AR on screen, and all of that, where it's really focused in during the game day presentation or the live game presentation, which obviously makes a lot of sense because you're going to get the most maximized, eyeballs, for 60 minutes. But again, going back to that theory and trend of having your gates open hours and hours before the event, you have people moving around the concourse and passing by just hallways, right? And so these are simply ingress, egress areas. And so we believe that we want to create a sponsorable piece of inventory on concourse that can be really unique to your facility. And so with that, we are getting in front of the teams now and early and say, hey, we're going to provide this to you, and we're going to request simply a whether it's a revenue share or a guaranteed minimum of development cost. Mm-hmm. And then above that, you can go out to your brand and mark it up 3, 4, 10x if you want. It doesn't matter to us because we are confident that if our minimum guarantees are hit in terms of our development costs, we do operate on a licensing model too. So if you have been able to show your ownership team and group generating revenue because you're bringing cutting edge technology that you were able to have a sponsor be a part of it, you sold a new piece of inventory, you're going to look like a rock star. We're going to be happy as a business because we have our devices in a new facility, our costs are covered, and then we've developed relationships with a new brand and a new property, and that it's going to live beyond one season, right? And so there could be reoccurring revenue opportunities down the line. And so for us in particular, that's how we really see a model that folks can capitalize on it. I think when you speak to a property, when you show the value proposition that you can generate revenue off of this, that's not coming from your fan, that it's not a pay per play experience, it's really a win-win. And then again, even the brands that are paying for it or underwriting it, they don't see it as a ancillary expense. They see it as a new form of media and engagement that they should have been a part of anyway. It's not just another billboard on the highway or a television commercial or radio spot, right? It's a new, unique way of getting your brand engaged with the consumer in a very non-threatening way. And you talk about marketing trends on, what people are averse to or what they're more drawn to from consumer standpoint, right? It's no one wants to be beat over their head with a credit card solicitation from a bank, right? But if that same bank provides an opportunity that you're able to be in a locker room and through virtual reality or go through a simulated sporting activity that you get to participate in something that you couldn't, you're not going to have that aversion to the brand. You're actually going to align with it in a much more accepting way because it was a great experience. And so you're going to be willing to listen to that email that comes in, the next week to say, hey, here are our products. Here's the photo and the video of your experience, by the way. And then, we're going to continue to market you. And so it really breaks the barrier down of, the way some folks have sort of been averse to brand messaging.
Is that last part, is that kind of the key for the representative from the brand, from the partner, being able to sell it to their superiors and saying, hey, we're going to do this bobblehead station. In doing so, we're gonna fans are gonna create a bobblehead of themselves. It's going to get emailed to them, so we're gonna get their email address, and then we can potentially send them marketing materials as well, and we're gonna have our logo on their final bobblehead screen. Is that? I mean, I don't want to say that's the only way, but okay.
That's the pass through, right? And so it's an exchange of information, if you will, where the user is willing to exchange that information to experience something, and then in return, the brand has opted in, or the user has opted into the brand messaging and anything that carries on.
Totally.
There's other ways that we've gotten creative with our clients and being able to add sweepstaking into the experiences and discounts and things of that nature that continues to drive the activation. And then there's also a set of analytics that we're able to provide in our dashboard that we're tracking. I mean, leveraging touchscreens, we're able to essentially track any touch point, right? And so we know what games are producing well, what the psychology of the gaming is.
Yeah.
We have all of the user information, and then even being able to run some other facial or detection software, we can get a bird's eye view of general eyeballs viewing a particular area. So not only do you have your active users, but we can take a deeper dive in maybe some of the passive engagements that people that are maybe standing back watching their family participate, or like the concourse traffic and all the views that kind of look at the screen. And so from a branding standpoint, that's valuable. That's traditional signage, and so we can break down demographic information and impression times and things of that nature. So it's I think the overall message is to a brand is that it's an alternative form of media that in our opinion is the coolest, right?
It's not passive. It's fans are participating, and they're coming to you. They're not just walking by and you hope they catch you in the periphery. They're walking right up to it and saying, "I want to play."
That's right. Yep.
I like it. A few more minutes left here with James Giulio. He's founder and CEO of MVP Interactive. Great conversation about what they do in the space, and we'd love to kind of hear. I'm sure technology has changed just a little bit since you first started. Social media has grown a little bit as well. So I mean, with stuff like VR and AR becoming more bigger and bigger, with the bar of expectation for fans and for users, for consumers, just raising exponentially every day, every season. What have you do you guys tend to try to innovate and present new ideas to your clients, your potential partners, or do they give you what they want? And then also how do you sort of keep up with the Joneses and know when it's the right time to try a new technology, or if the consumer base isn't quite ready for it yet? So a loaded question. You take that in the direction you'd like, James.
No, I mean, I think it's a great question to ask, and I think how we've been able to sort of navigate the landscape is that we really have understood and decided that it's our belief that technology isn't a zero-sum game, in the sense that you see a lot of companies, or maybe you even see some technologies where it's like it's one thing and that's it, right? And so for us, because everything that we've done has been custom in nature, it's allowed us to take that education and sort of development set and carry it over to new technologies. And so, like you said, I mean, in 2012, VR wasn't really a thing. I mean, there were examples of, movies in the 80s and headset talk and all of that good stuff. And there may have been some Silicon Valley, rumblings of stealth development of headsets and all of that good stuff. But as we know it today, in a short 5-6 year period, that's changed. And if someone had told me that, hey, you're going to be creating VR experiences for the Washington Redskins in 2012, I wouldn't know what they were talking about, right? So what we've done is literally take a layered approach of making sure that any level of development or experience that we built can leap pad us to another experience. And so internally, that's kind of been our approach, where you even mentioned the bobblehead example. That was done on a kiosk, right? And then that led opportunities to develop mobile applications of the same experience, and using a lot of the source code for that, and just tweaking some certain things. And even our gaming experiences, where we were building virtual home run derbies or virtual field goal kicks with a screen in front of you, but then reprogram that to live inside of a headset and track and create an immersive VR experience. And so I think that, we've done a pretty good job of keeping tabs and keeping up with the trends, just because it's really who we are. So it's our responsibility to make sure that we're able to service our clients in the best way possible. And granted, there is a bit of a follow the leader on occasion scenario where, something will come out and, we'll explore. And, I have to joke because if you remember, say 2014, beacon technology, that was the buzzword that was circulating around, and that was going to change the world, and Apple was going to drive that. And that was just, that it kind of went away, right? The market spoke and said that, it was too invasive. But every sports property and every brand, we're going to be doing beacons. It's beacon, beacon, beacon. And that was all over. And marketers couldn't get involved early on or over the long term, just because the market spoke and consumers weren't willing to enable and kind of go through the steps of making sure that they could be tracked and all of that good stuff. Right. So to say that we didn't explore or kind of put our toes in the water would be a lie, but it's not like we just we never just say, oh, well, we're now this company or we're now that company. So there is an element of the old, slogan of, jack of all trade and master of none, where we've kind of put that on its heels that, we are a bit of a master of all because, of that zero sum game that I mentioned it before. So, so I think, for us, it's been, we've had to be focused on who we want to be and what we are. And, 2 years ago, we could have easily said, all right, we're going to just roll up and just be a VR company and do that. And thank God we didn't, because now AR is the hot thing. So you just have to be focused. It's, being in a custom technology company, we know all things technology and how to produce them, but it's been important for us to stay focused that we're just not going to identify with just one. And so with that, I guess to answer another layer of your question is that, we are constantly trying to innovate and, take what we've learned and kind of come up with new concepts, because we're obviously a creative shop as well. And so I, for one, I think that's part of my daily walk to work is coming up with some crazy ideas and then trying to make them work and or pitch them to a particular client. So thankfully, being in an early stage startup kind of environment, you can kind of test those theories. And we've built strong relationships with folks, whether they're buyers or not. I can throw it by a couple of years and get their thoughts on it and to see if there's some traction. And so I think being experts in a couple of different spaces kind of helps us stay focused and kind of like rein in some of those crazy ideas to know what's marketable and what could work. And then other times, we really like to integrate with our clients. And so putting our egos and expertise aside to a degree, it's like, let's hear you. What ideas do you have? And, we can help drive you, or at least tell you how we can accomplish in creating those ideas come to life.
Really cool chatting with James and learning about MVP Interactive, all the cool stuff that they've built. And they continue to watch MVP Interactive because they continue to just really evolve with the space, and whatever they're doing, it seems to be on the cutting edge. So check out MVP Interactive and can keep an eye on everything they're doing in the greater sports digital fan experience space. Next up on the Best of Digital and Social Media Sports podcast, we're going to hear a great part of my conversation with Keith Steckler. Really a smart dude in the space, and an awesome guy in general. I've had a relationship with him now for a few years, and it's been great to see what he's done. He's now with the Heartland Group. He is a managing partner and also a co-founder of the Heartland Group. He was previously with MKTG when we had this chat, but the Heartland Group is doing some awesome stuff in the sports content space and also sports entertainment, building these really cool digital content, social media content campaigns and franchises, and just really awesome pieces of content. If you saw what Clemson football did, where they got a lot of great pub around the NFL draft with their Lego recreations of Trevor Lawrence, and just an awesome stuff. And But Keith is ultimately a really thoughtful and smart guy in the space. And in this part of the conversation, you're going to hear about what does it mean to create value on social media, and how do you go about developing smart digital and social media campaigns and projects that will ultimately deliver value and won't just be pretty pictures. Again, Keith is full of knowledge, full of insight, has been doing this for a long time and doing it well for a long time, is now building an awesome team there at the Heartland Group. So listen to a few minutes of my conversation with Keith Steckler.
No question, we still see a lot of people understanding, I guess, what I'll call the more traditional or historically what they've done in terms of sponsorship, and that is, logo slap. And we have a slide in our decks that is, welcome to the revolution of the fan. It is not the logo slap, the billboard, all these things. Like, you're no question going to need that.
Yeah.
But if you're not understanding the habits and behaviors of a fan and what sort of intrinsic value can you provide them when they're at the game. We've been talking a lot of different ideas about, is it an app? Is it something that happens in social? But, how do I help you enjoy the game more? Even something as like, how there's apps where it'll help you find parking. The same could be done for lines at concession stands and bathrooms. And you're starting to see a lot of stadiums start to adopt that. But that's really understanding what the consumer wants. But yeah, you're right. A lot of people still look at it as an afterthought, or it's at the end of marketing plans and better, worse, budgets of like, well, if we have whatever we have left, I'm sure we can make that work in social. And the hard truth is, yes, you can, but ideally you don't want that to be how you've crafted your digital and social campaign, is with whatever remnants you have at the end of the budget.
No doubt. And are you starting to see, or is there maybe stuff that I don't know about in the space where we are getting better at valuing share of voice, or a positive effect on your brand because you're doing something that fans are excited about, or you are providing utility to them and that has value even if you're not getting a direct sale or even an email or a name captured with it? Is that appreciated more and more? Are there solutions that are emerging out there that are helping to measure those kinds of, less measurable things, I guess, for lack of a better way of putting it?
Yeah, share voice is one. I think sentiment, where it started as positive, neutral, and negative, and you still had to go in with actual humans because the computers didn't always get it right. But even that has now been expanded to a plethora of different emotions, whether that's joy or sadness or anger. And, we use Crimson Hexagon as our tool, and there's a number of social listening tools out there. But I think, it's counseling and educating the brands of like, social is not this instant gratification. It is a uphill battle sometimes. And the term, dashboard, as you're talking about social listening and analytics, is true, because you do really want to show the small wins and the small changes, whether that's share of voice or the tone was negative and now it's shifting to positive. Yeah. And you start to become top of mind. In sports, it could be, hey, I got to go check them out. I got to go see a game. I got to go buy merch. I got to do whatever. But if it's another brand, like a CPG brand, and I'm in the aisle and I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that brand, or there's some reason that I'm remembering that logo or that packaging. That's the kind of stuff that social can do, and it doesn't often get credit for that sale, but it no doubt drove, you becoming top of mind and remembering it, and then deciding to make that purchase.
Oh, it's a great point. I think that's one of the biggest values that a lot of times you hear about NASCAR, with just seeing those logos over and over and over again and having an affinity for them. You become that much more likely to buy them among those fans. And obviously it happens across sports, but I think NASCAR is one you start to see them trying to measure that because they need to justify their value. But a few more minutes left here with Keith Steckler. He is Vice President and Group Director for Digital at MKTG. And I want to touch on something I alluded to earlier with that term digital and social. And I think a lot of times, we talk about, Wendy's is really sassy on social, but then we realize that, okay, we're mainly just talking about the Twitter, or, they've done a little bit better job of having that consistent brand across platforms. But I kind of want to dive into that a little bit of how, these terms get conflated, digital and social. How well are we doing as a business at really connecting those things? How important is it to connect those things and have the same messaging going across platforms, have the same branding? Do you find that to be, is it still a bit siloed, or have you seen social and digital really grow up together, in that what you're doing on Facebook and Facebook ads and Google on your website, on Twitter, on Instagram, is it starting to really become more important to have to be married under the same auspices?
Yeah, and unfortunately, there's still a lot of disconnect. But just to start, there's so many people that I think won't come out and say it, but the way I get a read on them is they almost think that this digital and social stuff is not here to stay, as if this is going away. Yeah. And so there are still slides in our decks that I can't even believe we still include, of like, social is the number one way people spend their time. Social has now recently, I think it was the last quarter, eclipsed as the number one way people get their news. So, I mean, I don't really understand why we're still having these conversations, but we are. And then when you get to the actual execution part, it really depends on how the brand is run, and even down to who is the social or digital team reporting to. Is it to marketing? Is it to comms? Like, what is it? And sometimes it's very disjointed. And for years, I had worked with brands who, even something down to search, the paid search and the organic search teams were different. And that is fascinating to me. Wow. Like, you guys don't talk. And so how I'm optimizing the website for organic search, I'm not sharing that. And paid doesn't share their terms. Like, that's crazy. So sometimes we were just the conduit between two teams to say, hey, Neil, you got to talk to Jeff. Like, you guys are not on the same page. And we would just be that middleman. And sometimes that helps and sometimes it doesn't. But I think the brands that really, roll up digital and social into one team, it should, for more intents and purposes, fall under marketing. I think a lot of people look at social as like this megaphone amplifier. It's a PR blast, and like, it can be, but that's not the only way you should be using those channels. So I do think we still have a long ways to go, but it's really because of how these teams are structured and how people have staff and teams report into them. I think those that don't really understand what this is or could be are doing teams a disservice by not getting the right leads at those divisions, or being more holistic. I know a lot of digital and social teams sit down to full marketing meetings. That's fantastic. Yeah. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that has to happen for people to see success.
Oh, especially when you're on the front end of hearing the consumers and watching them and seeing what they react to. It's so important to be able to use that information to inform what you're doing on all your other marketing channels and have it be together. I did kind of want to ask a question that there's no right answer to here, but to get your insight on is, if we're looking at different platforms where we have a different audience going to the website, especially via organic search versus paid search. We have a different audience on Facebook, different audience on our app, on Twitter, in person. Definitely some intersections in between, but is it more important to have a consistent look, feel, voice, brand, content strategy, marketing strategy, messaging on having that be the same or as close to the same as possible across platforms? Or should you be looking at it as, well, let's optimize the website or our app for this audience because we know they're different than the audience on this other platform? And it's kind of a dichotomy with a lot of Venn diagram intersection in between. But how do you kind of reconcile those potentially competing interests?
Yeah, I think it depends on the brand, but ultimately you want to just be clear about who the audience is and make sure that they're going to be okay with that. Even down to, like, if I'm coming to your website for questions or customer service, like, I don't want to get Wendy's snark as I'm trying to get an answer to my problem. Like, that's important to me. So I do think that brand potentially could be snarky on social, but if I'm coming to your site for information and there's something transactional I want from it, you don't want to, piss me off or have the incorrect tone, not understanding why I visited your website. But I do think that works for a lot of brands. A lot of the brands that have come up on Instagram and created a e-commerce presence because of that platform, I think you do see some very consistent tone and looks and appearances from them. But I think that's probably because you first entered their brand through Instagram and through social. So I think a lot of the brands that were existing before that need to really be thoughtful of what each channel is doing. And again, just like the print ad example, I think so many people think, okay, we're going to have this banner ad and then it's going to drive you here. And first of all, nobody's clicking on that stuff. But even if they do, a lot of brands just drop you on the homepage. And it's like, so what did you want me to do? Deep link, show something of value. Like, there's got to be something you ultimately want them to see. And so, analytics can be really positive or negative, but if you're looking at the web analytics and your bounce rate is really high, typically that's telling me you're not giving value to who has visited you. They left. But also, if the bounce rate is really high on like a frequently asked questions page, maybe that's good. Maybe you got them there, they got their answer, they left. So it's all context. But you do have to really think, getting back to your question, you have to think who's ultimately the target and the audience and make sure that tone and approach is going to work for everybody.
Yeah, and ultimately it's delivering upon expectations and providing value, wherever that intention is. And I love the fact that we're talking about website metrics and bounce rates as well as social, because it really does all tie together. And sometimes I think that's lost when you're just looking at what's my engagement rate and what's my reach, as opposed to not maybe what are fans doing once they click to my website from there, or after they like this post, or what that audience is doing after I show them an ad, after they watch that video. And I would love to hear actually about how, I'm not going to ask you what's the ROI of social media, but I am going to ask for some context into that question. And we talk about this brand or this team or this partner they're gonna sound. We want them to sound cool on social. We want fans to think that whether it's the snarkiness or being a smart troll or really doing something that's unique and quote unquote cool. Is there an ROI of that? Is there? I'm sure you've had teams and brands who say we want to be cool. We want to do something that's going to quote unquote go viral. And how do you even start to look at how to engineer a campaign that is going to show that the engagement rate was high and because it's high we have this kind of success, or reach is this number? Is there a way to engineer those kinds of things in advance, or are we still just going to be judging it with social media metrics kind of in a little bit of a silo?
Yeah, I think still a lot is very much siloed, but it's also like, what was the intent? I mean, even something down to like something we're looking at is what's the value of, if I'm at a game and I'm taking a selfie with my friends and in the back is a logo, but that's not the reason I took the picture. I mean, I took the picture because I'm at a game and I want to show you where I am. I didn't purposely, position the camera to get the whatever bank signage or the whatever quick serve restaurant logo. But those photos, no doubt, get posted to social, and wouldn't you, as the brand that's in the back of that photo by a logo, want to know about it? What's the value of that? That's, to me, that's a passive act versus somebody that legitimately took the photo to frame your logo. Two different things. But also, I mean, it's an uphill battle, and I think the best marketers understand that you got to take your time with this, and you could go viral. You could also pay for engagement. I mean, you could pay for whatever if that's legitimately your metric of success. And it's, somebody was talking to me not too long ago about if what we do in social can equate to X number of hits on the website, that's success. Yeah. And I was just like, are you kidding me? Because I don't know why that's successful. First of all, it's littered with problems, like back to what we were just talking about a few minutes ago. If it clicks to a website, what do you want them to do? Right. But that aside, if you're just being judged by a number, I'm dumbfounded with this. So I think, a lot of people understand that strong content is strong content, but it's also fleeting. And, I've posted a few things that have gotten some very good traction, nowhere near, some of the things that we talk about in terms of virality, but thousands of retweets or thousands of likes. And I want to say that the tweet that's done the best has yielded me 3 followers. So you just kind of think like, wow, thousands of retweets, I'm going to be getting hundreds of new followers. people don't care who the content came from. They just want to share the content.
Yeah.
And so I have to think the same is true for brands, that you want to go viral. Maybe they want to follow you to catch the next thing, or to, get into your DMs and try to get free stuff. But as a person, I can tell you, I've done it a few times. It doesn't yield what you think it would. And it's just kind of crazy. So the return on investment is very subjective based on what your measure is and what your intended outcome is. And then I think you can make a calculation or a strategy to pay off on what it is that you deem as success. How do we then back into the value of that, or what that means?
Fantastic chatting with Keith, and again being able to continue to keep in touch with him and see what he's doing at the Heartland Group as they continue to build out an amazing team and deliver awesome campaigns, awesome content. Just fantastic to see what he's doing. So listen to that full episode for sure, because you're going to learn a lot from Keith spending the full episode with him. Last up, we have reached the last snippet of the Best of Digital and Social Media Sports podcast. But last and certainly not least, you're going to hear a part of my chat with Will Frazier. He is the new media manager for Major League Baseball. We are right in the thick of Major League Baseball as I record this, of the MLB season for 2021. And Will is on literally his job to be have his finger on the pulse and be on the cutting edge of what's happening with digital and social media in the sports space and fan engagement space. This part of my chat, you're going to hear about how Will has looked at Twitch, and when TikTok was emerging at the time, it is continuing to emerge. He also spends a lot of time on YouTube, and you get some great insight into how MLB and Will in particular approaches these new platforms for the league, for the team, for the teams, for their content. It's a really cool job that Will has, a really important job, and of course MLB continues to be among the innovators and leaders in the digital space when it comes to fan experience and content. So listen up, because you're going to learn a lot in this part of my conversation with Will Frazier, new media manager for Major League Baseball.
I have been focusing a lot on kind of like exploratory platforms, and like YouTube's kind of like fallen in that, even though it's been around forever. But like do a lot of stuff with like Reddit from the league level, so teams reach out to me about that. And then like some new ones like Twitch and like TikTok are like very new ones where like I'll like give some info on that where I can, even though we're not like super activated on them. But like if teams have questions there, but yeah, we have we have like different people. Like we have like our Twitter main person, Instagram main person, things like that. Like, and like we kind of like enable teams, like if they want to go straight to like the platforms and ask them about stuff too, they're free to do that. And like I'm sure you've heard it from like the other people here, but like the like Twitter, Instagram partnership people are great. They're always super helpful. So
well, I'm gonna indulge you, man. I a few more minutes left here. The Will Frazier, new media strategist for Major League Baseball. I'd love to kind of hear what what you're looking at, what you're watching out for, what may be coming down the pipeline, whether it's something, whether Major League Baseball is going to do something or not, with Reddit, with TikTok, with YouTube, with some of the other platforms that you're looking at. All right, let's kind of go a little bit into each if you're able to, and what is Major League Baseball looking to do with, or could they be doing with Twitch, with YouTube? If you can, just a little bit on each platform. I'd love to kind of hear what you've learned so far and what we may be looking out for.
Yeah, for sure. Like I feel like I'm the guy at like MLB where like when you look at anything outside like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, like anything after that, I feel like I'm super honed in on. But like the main platforms, we have like a big content team that are like super focused on like the big three, and
right.
Snapchat, like I'll do some on-site stuff for, but YouTube, I think we really want to amp up like our like on the ground like documenting stuff, just at different like events, whether it's spring training, all-star. Done a lot of stuff kind of already this off season with like going to different like player like we were with like Javi Baez in Puerto Rico doing kind of like behind the scenes thing with him. We were with Jose Barrios from the Twins, pitcher for them, doing some like fun training stuff with him in Puerto Rico. So trying to like divvy up like sports like sports league YouTubes are so like highlight driven, and like I mean, there's just so many highlights that people want to see on YouTube anyway. And like we're super focused on like putting out like the best YouTube compilations that people might be interested in. I mean, if you're familiar at all with like NBA, NFL, NHL, and MLB YouTube, like they're super highlight driven, but like just their highlights presented like a different way. Like
well, I guess it's almost like if someone wants highlights, you can almost train them. Go to the MLB app, go to MLB.com. We have plenty of highlights there. They're all nicely cataloged and searchable. And YouTube might be more the place where we have evergreen content that's going to entertain you anytime.
Right.
And it was more, and also a little bit more lifestyle content and off the field to some degree.
Yeah. Like I feel like the NFL kind of got me to think a little bit differently about it, because they do stuff that like they'll focus on like one player, like Aaron Donald's who I think of, but like that's a super random one. But like Aaron Donald, every single one of his plays in the NFC Championship, like every single snap, like they'll just do it, and it's like that's cool. Like that's a way to like see his game that like you don't really see like anywhere else, and it fits kind of like the YouTube mold, YouTube algorithm. And I would say that YouTube and their algorithm, they probably have the craziest algorithm of any of these platforms. It's interesting and fascinating just how the whole universe works there, and it's been a fun thing to dive into, just like figuring out that community. And another thing we do with YouTube, we try to like get like baseball centric YouTubers like involved. Like there's just like the community there is like the communities just in general with YouTube are like super,
no doubt.
The people on there are like obsessed with them, and like you don't really see it outside of YouTube, so it's like you have to dive in and like figure that stuff out.
Tell me about
I'll just
Twitch,
run
Will.
through. Yeah, Twitch is super interesting. We have a lot of guys that love just like playing video games. Like I mean, it was Fortnite this year. But they're like, I feel like baseball guys in general are just big gamers because they have a lot of time on their hands when they're like doing travel ball and everything like that. It just sticks with them.
Yeah.
So the first thing with Twitch has just been trying to get some of our players like accounts. Like Alex Bregman was one of those guys, like Lance McCullers, like 2 Astros. They have Twitch accounts, and they'll like go on and stream some of their Fortnite games. Like we knew that guys were playing. It's just like a matter of like getting the stream too. This one guy, I don't know, you might know because you're a baseball guy, but Trevor May from the Twins.
Oh yeah.
He's like he's like in like Ninja's like clan on Fortnite. Like they play together all the time, and he's like a thing on Twitch. It's like it's crazy. But from the league side, we would do. I think if we were going down that and then doing like an MLB page, the gaming aspect would be part of it. But we do a lot of just like younger focused baseball coverage. Since since the demos there are pretty young and pretty male focused, but it's still like a lot of young fans that we would want to like have on our side. And the correlation, it seems like, between gaming and baseball is pretty high. It seems like it seems like a lot of gamers kind of like baseball too.
Yeah.
So we're figuring out like what we would do exactly there. Just because like
far for Twitch,
I don't know how like legal it is if we had like just random people playing video games and streaming it, but like I think we're just gonna try to get creative. And Twitch too, they really want they want to do more than just the gaming part of it, which sounds crazy because it's like that's what they're all based on, but it's I feel like they're trying to work with some publishers to give like other content outside of gaming, because they see themselves as a big platform. I mean, they're owned by Amazon. They're pretty much. I think I read that they're technically the biggest live streaming platform on the internet. So that's crazy to think about.
There's some insane numbers. Do you guys look at Twitch, and I'm sure it's a little bit of column A and column B, but as a place where you can help fans and potential fans, casual Twitch users, kind of
Mhm.
get to know the players a little more beyond baseball,
Yeah.
so they might be, enjoy an Alex Bregman, enjoy a Trevor May, or is it also, will we be seeing like, MLB 2K home run derbies on Twitch, and having is it a little bit more about making fans and fans love baseball more or love the players more, and then in turn watch them when they're on the field?
I think it's a combo.
Mhm.
I think it's a great way for some of our players that might not like doing other things. Like it's an easy way for them to be comfy and like show their personality because they're already doing something that they were doing anyway.
Right.
It's just that they're kind of like chatting like in front of the screen, and like it's almost like they're chatting with like somebody that would be there with them, like a friend and things like that. I mean, it's like I said, I think it's like it seems like the people that are on Twitch are like an age group that we want to have on board. It's just figuring out how how would that content actually be good for them to like actually enjoy it, and not just us doing it, but like actually it being like good too. So
Totally.
we have some good like I mean I have like ideas in my head, but like you had Jess Kleinschmidt. Unfortunately, she left Cut 4, but like some of our Cut 4 people would be good people to just like they could do a live stream of like watching a game or like playing MLB The Show if they wanted to do like a preview of like a big game and just like throw their own commentary. That's kind of like what I have in mind, but it's a work in progress.
I love it. Something for us to watch. And then I'm enjoying this way too much. So before I get to this terrible stat, tell me a little bit about Reddit and maybe one of the other emerging platforms like TikTok / Musically. But where does MLB see Reddit? And I know there's a lot. I mean, that's a platform that has had staying power over the years. Maybe hasn't scaled as much as others, but certainly still a place that's a highly engaged audience.
Yeah, I mean, I have a soft spot in my heart for Reddit. Like they're great people to work with. We got on board with them, I think 2016, maybe like late 2015. We got on board with just like getting super active on there on the baseball subreddit, which to break down Reddit, like it's just like there's like a million communities. Mm-hmm. The baseball subreddit is kind of like the baseball hub of Reddit, and there's like I think 850,000 people subscribe to it.
Wow.
It's pretty active. I mean, it's all the big sports ones are pretty active. Like the NBA one's super active. The hockey one's super active. The fans there are like out of this world. They are super smart, like super funny. Like it's just like a different level of fan that like, it seems like they're fans who like something so much that they like, it just makes sense they're like in a community like that. So we got active there in 2016, just like throwing different content on there. Like we did some different AMAs just to like be like doing things that like fit the platform really well. But it's just like with them, I think we really just like to stay active with, like conversations and stuff. Like a big thing there is just kind of like conversing. It's not, doing like people, if Adam LB puts out good content like on a different platform, somebody's probably already going to post in the subreddit. It's not going to be us. Mm-hmm. So it's more of like, where can we, what like niches of our content can we like take and put on there? Like we do a lot of like StatCast stuff on there. We do a lot of like graphical charts, just stuff that like might not appeal on other platforms. We're like down the experiment there. But no, like they are. It seems like they have some serious like sticking power. They like it's to some people that's just like the internet is they'll go to Reddit and check out everything they're interested in, and it doesn't seem like they leave it unless they're like reading articles that they find on Reddit.
Right.
But it's the traffic there is no joke. I think it's super intimidating at first because like it's just some of the subreddits are so like we guide teams in like their team subreddits, and those are pretty small. Like they have like 20,000 subscribers, and maybe they'll only have like 1,000 people online at times. But like the fans there are usually like super fans, and we've tried to like figure out like good ways to like reward those fans because they're like the big fans on the internet. like next level fans. So yeah, it's always there. It's always something that I'm like keeping an eye on, and we'll comment on people's stuff. We'll post some different content there. It's not as heavy as the other ones, just because we don't need to like. I mean, you don't really need to like run an account. It's mostly just like contributing to that community, and then it's fun.
And then tell me about
I'll speak on TikTok. TikTok is interesting. We're not really late, like, but we're like the NBA's had an account for a while, and they have like 3.6 million followers there. Mm-hmm. And so we were like looking at what they're doing. It's like, wow, like, you know, we have like moments that on our broadcast with like guys like showing personality and doing fun things, like pretty similar to like how they run their account. Mm-hmm. So we're experimenting with it right now. We'll see where it goes. Like we don't have like super, like, we don't think it's going to be like groundbreaking, but like just with like the demos there and like just how popular it is, it's like, well, let's try it out at least.
Yeah.
But it's interesting running it from like a brand perspective, just because like the whole like music thing, like, do we want to use this music on this platform? Like, are we allowed to use it?
Right.
Like, it's crazy, but it's I don't know, it's kind of like Vine, but like just a little bit weirder with some of the stuff I've seen on there, but it's something. It's super popular. It's been super popular for like the last 6 months.
Is there any opportunity beyond like the social platforms we think of that prevail in North America that, you know, the popularity of a Shohei Ohtani, or, you know, I mean, going way back to like Ichiro days, I'm thinking certainly with Ohtani, because he just came on the scene and is an international superstar. Is there anything that you have found, or that you guys have found at the league level, that, hey, you know, we have, you know, millions and millions of Japanese fans now tuning in that weren't as tuned in before Ohtani arrived, you know, and Facebook's our best way to get them, or we should get online, or we should be looking at Weibo.
Right.
Is there anything that we should be on the lookout for as, you know, the Japanese audience it kind of really gets in tuned as Ohtani continues to star?
Yeah. No, I love that you brought Ohtani up, but we have a guy on our staff that like is super honed in on like the international social stuff. Mm-hmm. Heard all the platforms you've mentioned thrown around between Line and Weibo. I'm pretty sure we're active on both, but I'm not 100% sure. And we're actually working together on like the TikTok piece, because it's big in Japan, big in Asia.
Yeah.
So me and him are actually working on that project together, because they want to activate in Japan.
Very cool.
With TikTok. So yeah, like he's pretty all over it. I can't speak to like a ton of it, but like Ohtani was nuts last year. Like if we just like mentioned his name like on YouTube and like a title, it would boost like a video like 10 times the performance that I usually get. So it was crazy when he first came up last year.
One last thing before we get to the shareable stat, then we'll have more fun with Will Frazier in our rapid fire segment. What's the you know, kind of the point of all this? You know, at the end of the day, you know, when you're engaging fans on these social platforms, is the end goal to eventually, you know, especially if a fan, you know, maybe lives abroad or does not live in a major league market, to get them to maybe subscribe to MLB.TV, to engage with your content so it can be sponsored, to eventually buy merchandise? Or are you guys just most focused on, you know, let's maximize the engagement we have, and we have other folks that are trying to monetize that?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of a mix. Like, I think right now, like our department is super focused on just like trying to draw in like new fans just with like cool content. Like in the past, I would definitely say like we were super focused on like the monetizing part, like the sponsorship angle, like the monetizing different campaigns, trying to get stuff like monetized. And it's always super important, like making like content that we can sell. But I think for us, we really like want to kind of like stay flexible with like what's going on in the social world, just to like try to draw in as many fans as we can, because we tried to like link back to like our site on like everything, and like it's like how much did that actually hurt us, like, you know, with like with our reach and impressions and things like that. Like how much does it like dock us? But like, yeah, it's a mix. I think we right now want to lean into just like overall like growth of like fandom in baseball.
Yeah.
But like I think the monetization aspect is like always there.
Well, that was an awesome one to end on. Again, you can listen to the full conversation with Will Frazier of MLB if you listen to episode 136 of the podcast. But Will, with that being said, that will do it for this episode of the Best of Digital and Social Media Sports podcast. Thanks again for coming along for the ride. Again, it's a pleasure being able to speak to these great people. I feel so lucky every day. It's a privilege. I learn so much. I hope you're able to learn a lot too. Again, you can check out the full episodes. You can visit the website, dsmsports.net. Check out the podcast on any of your favorite podcast platforms where you can look back on episodes and listen to these full episodes as well as many others in the archive. And, of course, we'll have some new ones coming out in the future. This is your host, Neil Horwitz. Hit me up on LinkedIn. Find me on Twitter, NJH287. And, of course, continue to watch out for new episodes of the podcast coming at you soon. Until next time, this is Neil Horwitz signing off for the Digital and Social Media Sports Podcast.